There comes a moment in your journey where holding on costs more than releasing ever will. And I know letting go sounds simple, but it's not easy. We hold on to what we've normalized: pain, rejection, guilt, disappointment, because it's familiar. But you cannot be who God is calling you to be and still carry what He's trying to heal you from. You have to let it go. Let go of what they did. Let go of what you didn't do. Let go of who left, what failed, who hurt you, what didn't happen, and how long it took. Because as long as your hands are full of what was, they'll never be free to receive what can be. You are trying to step into freedom with chains in your hand. But freedom doesn't happen when everything's fixed. It begins the moment you decide to release what broke you. Letting go doesn't mean it didn't matter. It means it doesn't control you anymore. It means you finally realize that you can't carry it and you're calling at the same time. You can't carry the shame and the oil. You can't carry the bitterness and the blessing. You have to choose. And the version of you that is rising cannot be held back by the wounds you refuse to release. Sometimes it's not the pain that's keeping you stuck, it's the memory of the pain. You've moved on physically, but you're still there emotionally, still replaying it, still rehearsing it. But sis, your destiny does not live in your memory, it lives in your movement, and it's time to move. Not because you're over it, but because staying stuck is costing you more than healing ever will. I know it's hard to release what you never got closure from, but closure is not always a conversation, it's a decision. It's deciding that your future matters more than the explanation. It's realizing that their apology will never carry more weight than God's affirmation. It's believing that even broken pieces can build something beautiful when placed in God's hands. Letting go is how you make room for resurrection. The dream can't rise if your hands are full of resentment. The purpose can't breathe if your mind is still rehearsing every loss. What if what you're holding on to is the very thing blocking your overflow? What if your yes to healing is the door that your whole family's breakthrough is waiting on? You don't have to have all the answers to let go. You just need to trust that what's ahead of you is greater than what's behind you. You are not your pain. You are not your past. You are not your worst season. You are God's masterpiece, and masterpieces don't belong in cages. So today, choose your freedom. Choose your healing. Choose to let it go. Letting go is more than just moving on. It's more than deleting a number, unfollowing a page, or stuffing your emotions in a box and pretending they don't exist. Letting go is a spiritual release. It is the surrender of your soul back to God after it has been tied to pain, people, or places that were never meant to hold it. It's the sacred act of opening your hands and saying, God, I'm not carrying this anymore. Not because it didn't hurt, but because I can't afford to stay stuck. There are things you're holding on to that were only supposed to be temporary: a mistake, a rejection, a betrayal, a loss. Yes, they were real. Yes, they hurt. But now they are living in your spirit rent-free, weighing you down, making you question your value, blocking your joy, limiting your faith. And here's the thing: what your soul doesn't release will become what your identity absorbs. That's why letting go isn't optional. It's vital. We don't just carry pain in our hearts. We carry it in our posture, in our decisions, in our silence, in our defensiveness, in the way we don't trust, in the way we don't try. That's why God is saying, daughter, give it to me. Not because He doesn't know what it did to you, but because He knows what it's doing to you now. And the truth is, you were never created to carry this kind of weight. You weren't designed to walk around full of shame. You weren't built to carry guilt like a badge of honor. That bitterness, that grief, that offense, it's not yours to hold forever. That burden belongs on the altar. And the enemy wants you to believe that holding on makes you strong, but in the kingdom, strength looks like surrender. Strength looks like tears falling as you lift your hands and whisper, God, I can't do this anymore. Releasing it is not weakness, it's wisdom. It's recognizing that the longer you carry something God never intended for you, the more damage it will do to the part of you He wants to heal. There are some versions of you that cannot emerge until you let go of what's been choking your spirit. The promise is already yours, but you won't feel it until you free yourself. Some of us have carried our pain so long it became our identity. We don't even know who we are without the trauma, without the struggle, without the drama. But the Spirit of God is calling you higher. He's saying, I called you healed. I called you whole. I called you free. But I need you to drop what's in your hands so I can place what's in mine. This is your release moment. The shift begins when you get honest, when you stop pretending you're fine, when you stop minimizing the damage, when you stop protecting the memory of what wounded you. You don't have to justify it anymore. You just have to let it go. The grief, the fear, the regret, it served a purpose, but it has no place in your next. And God's not asking you to forget it. He's asking you to surrender it. So if your spirit has felt heavy lately, if your joy feels blocked, if your vision feels blurred, it might not be that you're broken. It might be that you're burdened. And freedom won't come from working harder or fixing everything. It will come from one sacred decision. God, I release this to you. That's not just a decision, it's a deliverance. Pain has a way of becoming home when you've lived in it long enough. It starts as something you survived, but before you know it, it turns into something you protect. You normalize it. You adjust your life around it. You stop asking for more, because more might mean you have to leave behind what's become familiar. And here's the hard truth: sometimes it's not the pain that's holding you, it's your fear of living without it. We don't talk enough about the comfort of dysfunction, about how trauma can become a rhythm, about how some of us have wrapped our identity around heartbreak so tightly that healing feels like betrayal. You prayed for freedom, but when it shows up, it feels foreign. Because what's familiar, even if it's painful, feels safer than the unknown. And so you stay stuck, not because you can't move, but because movement feels like loss. Maybe you learn to expect rejection, so now love feels suspicious. Maybe you learn to expect chaos, so peace feels boring. Maybe you've only known how to hustle for your worth, so rest makes you feel lazy. That's what familiar pain does. It distorts what's healthy. It makes healing uncomfortable. It convinces you that survival is your ceiling when it was only meant to be your starting point. Sometimes God will disrupt the rhythm you've created around your pain, not to shame you, but to awaken you. To say, daughter, that's not home, that's a holding place. That's not your inheritance, that's your in-between. But if you've never seen healthy modeled, if you've never experienced peace that didn't come with a price, you might run back to what hurt you just because it feels known. Pain has a voice too, and it whispers things like, don't trust again, you'll never recover. This is as good as it gets. And if you don't challenge that voice, you'll start making decisions through the lens of wins instead of the lens of worth. That's why God doesn't just want to deliver you from the pain. He wants to deliver you from the narrative it left behind. The problem isn't just what happened. It's what you started believing about yourself because of what happened. That you're not worthy, that you're too damaged, that you're too late. But the devil is a liar, and sometimes the only thing standing between you and your healing is the lie you've become loyal to. The one that says, this is just who I am now. But no, this is who you survived being. Now let God show you who you really are. Familiar pain will always fight unfamiliar healing, because healing asks you to trust, to hope again, to lay down your armor and be soft in a world that made you hard. And that's scary, but you weren't born to live stuck in cycles. You were born to break them, to stand in the gap for the next generation and say, it hurt me, but it won't hold me, it shaped me, but it won't stop me. You've spent enough time adapting to your wounds. Now it's time to be transformed by your freedom. But transformation doesn't happen until you decide, I will no longer bow to what's familiar just because it's comfortable. There's more for you. But first, you've got to stop calling bondage home. The pain is real, but so is your power to leave it behind. Freedom sounds beautiful until you realize it costs you something. Not money, not applause. But surrender, freedom requires empty hands. And that's where many of us struggle, not because we don't want freedom, but because we don't want to let go of what we've learned to carry. We've grown attached to the pain, the grudge, the fear, the title, the narrative. And God is saying, I have something for you, but your hands are full. You can't step into your next season carrying bags from the last one. You can't pick up peace while holding on to bitterness. You can't reach for joy if your hands are wrapped around shame. The breakthrough you're praying for is on the other side of what you refuse to release. Not because God is withholding it, but because there's no room for it in the current version of your heart. It's not just about letting go of bad things. Sometimes it's about letting go of safe things, familiar things, comfortable patterns. People who feel like home, even when they drain you. Thoughts you've rehearsed so long they feel like truth. And while your spirit is crying out for freedom, your hands keep grabbing onto survival. You say you want more, but God can't pour into hands that won't open. Some of us are so used to carrying everything that we don't know how to be free without being busy. We've equated exhaustion with progress, but real freedom doesn't look like doing it all. It looks like laying it down. It looks like trusting God enough to say, this fight is no longer mine. It looks like being okay with not controlling everything. Because true freedom is not about grasping, it's about releasing. Empty hands may feel like loss at first, but they are a declaration of trust. They say, God, I believe what you have for me is better than what I'm trying to hold on to. That kind of faith is disruptive. It stretches you, it makes you uncomfortable. But it also positions you for divine overflow, the kind you can't fabricate, fake, or force. The kind that only comes from heaven. God isn't just trying to free your schedule, he's trying to free your soul. That means letting go of performing, letting go of people pleasing, letting go of carrying everyone else's burdens like it's your job. He's saying, daughter, I never asked you to hold all of this. I never required you to shrink just to be accepted. I never told you that broken was the only way to be loved. But you won't hear that truth until you free up your grip. Empty hands are scary, because when we release the familiar, we're left in the in-between, the place where what was is gone and what's next hasn't arrived yet. But that space, that's where miracles happen. That's where clarity speaks. That's where God reminds you who you are without all the things you thought you needed. And in that sacred stillness, you realize you were never empty. You were just finally available. So many of us are praying for open doors, but walking around with closed fists, still gripping offense, still clinging to timelines, still holding on to the image we think we have to maintain. But freedom won't fit into full hands. It comes to those who dare to release, who risk vulnerability for victory. And that release, it's not the end. It's the beginning of the life you were always meant to live. You keep replaying what happened. You keep walking through the memories like they're fresh wounds, like the future somehow lives there. But I came to remind you your destiny is not behind you. It's not in the relationship that failed. It's not in the job you lost. It's not in the moment you wish you could change. That was a chapter, not the whole story. That was a scene, not the full script. God's not done. And your future didn't stop where your heartbreak began. There's a lie the enemy tells you when something ends, that your value ended with it. That because it broke, you're broken. That because they walked away, you're unworthy. But the enemy can only haunt you with the past because he's terrified of your future. If you ever stopped looking backward, if you ever let go of what you thought it should have been, you'd step fully into what it's always been meant to become. Some of you are grieving timelines more than you're grieving people, grieving the idea of where you thought you'd be by now. But hear me. God's timeline is not your timeline, and delay doesn't mean denial. That door closed not because you weren't enough, but because it wasn't aligned. The rejection you thought ruined you might be the redirection that's about to release you. We stay stuck because pain makes a home in our memory. It convinces us that the moment of failure defines everything after. But the truth is, God doesn't live in your memory. He lives in your movement. And as long as you're looking back, you're blocking the vision that's waiting ahead. There's provision in your next step. There's clarity in your next les. But you won't see it if your eyes are still fixed on what's already over. Your destiny is not behind you. It's calling you forward. It's the version of you haven't even met yet. The healed you, the bold you, the restored, unrecognizable, fully walking in her calling you. But that version can't rise while you're still tethered to trauma. That version requires a decision to stop dragging old disappointment into new opportunities. It's time to stop resurrecting what God already buried. There's a reason the rearview mirror is smaller than the windshield. Because what's ahead of you matters more than what's behind you. You can glance at it, learn from it, honor the lesson. But you don't build a future looking in reverse. You don't discover purpose by rewinding pain. The resurrection didn't happen in the tomb. It happened when Jesus walked out of it. And it's time you walk out too. You've cried over it. You've questioned it. You've carried the weight of it for far too long. And now you stand at a crossroads, not between success and failure, but between past and purpose. You get to decide, will I stay where it broke me, or will I rise where he called me? Because God doesn't call you back. He calls you forward. Into wholeness, into identity, into divine alignment. So take one more step, not because everything is fixed, but because your destiny deserves movement, because your calling is still alive, because your purpose didn't die in your mistake. It's waiting ahead of you. And no matter what's behind you, your future still has breath in it. Closure is one of the most misunderstood parts of healing. We think it has to come from them, the one who hurt us, the one who walked away, the one who broke what we were trying to build. We wait on apologies, explanations, accountability. But sometimes closure isn't something you get, it's something you give yourself. Sometimes you have to decide that peace matters more than answers. There are wounds that won't ever get the, I'm sorry, you deserve. There are people who won't acknowledge the damage they caused, who won't come back and tell the truth. But here's what I need you to know: your healing is not dependent on their confession. If you keep waiting for someone else to make it right before you move forward, you're handing your power over to the very thing that hurt you. Closure doesn't always come with a bow. It doesn't always show up at your front door with clarity and resolution. Sometimes closure looks like crying your last tear over it. Sometimes it looks like deleting the messages, unfollowing the timeline, or choosing not to replay that conversation one more time in your head. Closure is when you stop waiting for someone else to set you free and decide to free yourself. You don't need a roundtable conversation with your past to make peace with your future. Sometimes silence is your answer. Sometimes the unanswered questions are divine protection. And sometimes God doesn't let the door reopen because he knows your heart would walk right back into what nearly destroyed you. So don't confuse their absence with abandonment. It might just be grace. There's a power in saying, even without the closure I wanted, I'm choosing the healing I need. Because closure is less about what they say and more about what you decide. It's drawing a line in the sand and declaring that your growth will no longer be postponed by someone else's silence, that your wholeness is not a group project, that you're no longer waiting to feel validated before you move forward. Closure doesn't always mean you stop feeling. It means you stop feeding what's no longer feeding you. It means you stop watering what can't grow. It means you stop showing up for a story that already ended and expecting a different ending. And that's hard. That takes maturity. That takes discernment. But most of all, it takes a deep understanding of your worth. You are allowed to walk away without closure and still be whole. You are allowed to be confused and still move in purpose. You are allowed to have scars and still carry anointing. Healing is not perfection, it's progress. And part of that progress is realizing that your peace doesn't have to wait for their permission. You can be at peace without their apology. You can be free without their explanation. There is a version of you on the other side of closure that doesn't need everyone to understand her journey. She's not bitter, but she's also not begging. She's not angry, but she's also not answering calls from the past. She's not lost. She's finally found herself. And it started the moment she stopped waiting for closure and chose to create it. Bitterness doesn't always look loud. Sometimes it's quiet. It hides behind fake smiles, behind sarcasm, behind that cold wall you built to protect yourself. But whether it screams or simmers, bitterness is heavy. It weighs down your joy. It suffocates your hope. It steals your clarity. And worst of all, it blocks the blessing that God is trying to pour into your life. You can't walk fully in your purpose while dragging a heart full of resentment. You can go through the motions, you can perform, you can serve, but your soul will feel disconnected. Bitter roots grow deep, and they don't just poison how you see others. They start to distort how you see yourself. You stop expecting beauty. You stop believing for better. You stop praying with boldness because part of you feels like you don't even deserve what you're asking for. That's what bitterness does. It makes you suspicious of good things. It makes you guard it with grace. You see blessings as traps. You see love as risky. You start filtering every opportunity through the lens of what hurt you. And without realizing it, you begin to reject what you were created to receive. Not because God isn't faithful, but because your heart is too full of pain to recognize his provision. Bitterness thrives in silence, in unspoken pain, in swallowed anger, in unresolved trauma. And the enemy wants you to keep pretending it doesn't hurt. He wants you to stay numb, to stay proud, to stay offended. Because he knows that as long as your heart stays hard, your spirit stays stuck. That's why healing isn't just emotional, it's spiritual. You're not just recovering from people, you're reclaiming your access to God's favor. There's a difference between remembering and rehearsing. Healing remembers to learn. Bitterness remembers to relive. Every time you relive it, you reattach yourself to it. And every time you reattach yourself to it, you lose more of the space God wants to use for new things. Your next breakthrough needs room. And bitterness will always occupy the space where blessing was meant to grow. You're not weak for being hurt. You're not broken because you're still healing. But you are powerful enough to decide that your future is too important to be filtered through the past. Letting go of bitterness doesn't mean what happened was okay. It means it's not in control anymore. It means you've decided that peace is more important than revenge, that freedom matters more than being right. The blessing that's coming won't fit into a bitter heart. God wants to overflow you, but he also wants to protect what he gives you. And if he knows that blessing will be choked by unforgiveness, he'll wait. Not because you're being punished, but because he wants you whole enough to hold what's holy. Some blessings are delayed not by the devil, but by the bitterness we won't confront. So ask yourself, what am I still carrying that's blocking my overflow? What am I still angry about that's taking up the space where healing should be? What haven't I forgiven that's keeping my hands too full to receive? Because when your heart is open, your life can finally receive the kind of breakthrough that bitterness was keeping out. You think your healing is just about you, but it's not. It's about your mother who didn't know how to love herself. It's about your grandmother who suffered in silence. It's about the daughters you haven't birthed yet and the sons you haven't raised. Your healing is a key. And when you choose to do the work, to feel the pain, to let God walk you through the mess, you're not just healing your heart. You're disrupting generations of cycles that tried to stay alive through you. There are patterns in your bloodline that feel familiar: abandonment, addiction, silence, abuse, pride, shame, and they've wrapped themselves around each generation like roots. They show up in different forms, but they carry the same weight. And here you are standing at the crossroads, holding the opportunity to be the interruption, to be the one that says, it may have run in the family, but it ends with me. You weren't chosen because you were the strongest. You were chosen because you were willing. Because something inside you refused to normalize dysfunction. Because you started asking questions, seeking therapy, leaning into God, praying differently, responding differently. You stopped calling trauma just how I was raised and started calling it what it is: a cycle that no longer deserves your agreement. And that healing, it's hard, it's messy. It confronts you with truths about your family, your past, even yourself. But God isn't exposing you to break you. He's awakening you. He's showing you what needs to be healed so you don't pass it down in silence. So your children don't inherit your unspoken pain. So your legacy becomes healing, not hiding. You are not weak for being the first to feel everything. You are not dramatic for needing help. You are not rebellious for refusing to repeat what broke you. You are a pioneer, a curse breaker, a cycle ender. And every time you choose to speak what was silenced, to cry instead of numb, to forgive instead of pass it down, you are cutting ties with what tried to own your lineage. It's deeper than you. Every time you say no more, you echo that declaration through time. You're healing wounds you didn't cause and protecting generations you'll never meet. And heaven is watching, cheering you on, saying, This is what legacy looks like. Not just money or names or titles, but freedom. Emotional, spiritual, soul level freedom. Sometimes you'll feel the weight of what you're breaking, and it'll seem too heavy. But don't mistake the weight for failure. It's proof that you're carrying something generations refused to touch. You are not losing your mind. You are shedding identities that were handed to you by pain, not by God. You're not falling apart. You're falling into purpose. And when you heal, you don't just rewrite your story. You rewrite the stories of those connected to you. Your healing changes the way your children love, the way your nieces and nephews believe, the way your family speaks and prays and hopes. And it all started because one woman said, "This may be what I came from, but it's not where I'm staying."